They never expected to wake up with thoughts of you occupying their mind so completely. This is the first important thing you need to understand. Most people are too afraid to face what they have buried deep within themselves, using all their strength and determination over a long period of time. The intensity had already taken hold of them because remaining indifferent seemed to work quietly in a subtle way that was difficult to notice at first. But this situation was never truly silent. It became a genuine battle they had been losing even while their eyes remained closed and the world around them appeared perfectly calm on the surface. You sensed it yourself, didn't you? There was that slight shift and that hidden current of energy as though something significant was developing quietly beneath their composed and steady exterior. It was never really about distance or uncertainty. It was something much deeper and far more serious. This involved a true awareness of what was happening inside them without hesitation or doubt. People do not usually welcome their emotions when those feelings first begin to emerge. Instead, they resist them, question them, and examine them from every possible angle. They conceal those emotions beneath countless excuses, their pride, and the strong emotional barriers they have carefully built over many years. What they feel for you does not align with the image of themselves they have worked so hard to preserve every single day. This conflict is where everything begins to grow dangerous and difficult for them. The more a feeling challenges their sense of control and pride, the harder they fight to suppress it. This process is what psychologists such as Freud described as repression, the mind's natural tendency to push away desires or emotions that feel uncomfortable or unacceptable. But repression is not simply forgetting, it creates pressure, and pressure continues building over time. Eventually, that pressure finds a way to surface, regardless of how much effort is used to contain it. Most people fail to understand this truth until much later than they should. What they refused to acknowledge yesterday gradually becomes the force influencing their thoughts and behavior today, often without them fully realizing it. That is exactly why this morning felt different from every other ordinary morning they had experienced before. It was not because something entirely new appeared. It happened because something finally gave way inside them, and you were not there to witness that deeply personal collapse of denial. This hidden collapse was never a dramatic confession or a direct message. Instead, it was a moment when every strategy they used to escape their feelings stopped working completely. During that heavy silence, their usual distractions disappeared, and you emerged not merely as a memory, but as an unavoidable realization. Attraction can often be dismissed, curiosity can be ignored, but when something carries genuine emotional significance, the mind begins to fracture under the weight of avoidance. They were forced to confront a question they had avoided for a very long time. Why do you affect them so deeply? They attempted to answer that question using logic alone. They convinced themselves the feeling was temporary, insignificant, and destined to fade with time. They used every explanation they could find: coincidence, chemistry, timing, circumstance, anything except the truth they feared the most. The reality is simple. People do not struggle endlessly to explain away something that holds no importance. They do not wage war against emotions that are meaningless, nor do they work tirelessly to bury feelings that lack depth. Every effort they made to remove you from their thoughts only made your presence stronger and more defined. Every distraction eventually failed exactly when they needed it most. This is not evidence of weakness, it is evidence of something real taking shape beneath the surface. They never wanted something they could not fully control. They wanted complete authority over their emotions, reactions, and decisions. Then you entered their life and disrupted that carefully maintained balance. You became the one variable they could not solve, the one emotion they could not predict, the one presence they could not erase. No matter how determined they were, that loss of certainty is what frightened them most. It was never only about you, it was about what you awakened within them. You did not simply create a small disturbance in their life, you awakened something that had been sleeping for years. And people rarely fear emotions themselves. They fear losing mastery over who they believe they are. This explains why they withdrew unexpectedly, and why their behavior became inconsistent. Their energy felt scattered, not because they cared too little, but because they cared more than they knew how to handle comfortably. Feeling something this deeply requires a decision, and they were not ready for that decision. Avoidance is not proof that desire is absent. Often it proves the opposite. It shows that the desire has become powerful enough to create conflict. Their internal struggle began taking control as the conscious mind ordered them to remain safe behind walls of logic, while the subconscious continued bringing you back. It rebuilt your presence during quiet moments exactly when their distractions lost their power. They slowly realized that you were not fading from their mind as they had hoped. Instead, your image became clearer, sharper, more difficult to ignore. Denial requires distance to survive, but your influence continued growing stronger, even without physical closeness. Once a feeling moves beyond uncertainty and settles into subconscious certainty, it no longer asks for permission, it demands attention. That exact turning point arrived for them this morning, in a quiet yet powerful way, without comfort, without warning, without escape. It arrived as a silent wave that left them exposed to a truth they could no longer avoid. Their walls did not collapse because someone attacked them from the outside. They collapsed beneath the weight of everything hidden inside. And somehow that affected them more deeply than any spoken confession ever could. Because the truth was not spoken aloud, it was understood. And once something important is understood at that level, it becomes extremely difficult to reverse. A person can mislead others. A person can even deceive themselves for a time. But once the mind accepts a truth completely, it rarely releases it without resistance. They know now, not partially, not vaguely, not with uncertainty. They know, yet acceptance does not immediately create peace. In many cases, it creates even more turmoil because now they must confront everything they previously avoided. They must consider what these feelings truly mean, what changes may be required, how their future could be affected, and perhaps most importantly, what they stand to lose if they continue pretending nothing exists. Feelings of this magnitude do not remain still. They evolve, they intensify, they continue moving forward. Right now, they stand at the edge of all that accumulated pressure, doing everything they can to maintain a sense of control while the foundation beneath them continues shifting. Part of them still wants to retreat into familiar patterns. Part of them still wants to convince themselves that ignoring the situation will somehow make it disappear. But another part knows better. Another part has already seen the truth clearly. That is why the struggle feels so exhausting. They are no longer fighting against you. They are fighting against what they now understand. The mind wants certainty. The heart wants honesty. And when those two forces pull in different directions, people often become confused by their own behavior. One day they appear distant. The next day they seem emotionally present. One moment they convince themselves they are over it. The next moment they find themselves thinking about you before the day has even begun. That inconsistency is not always manipulation. Sometimes it is the visible evidence of an invisible conflict, a conflict between what they feel and what they believe they should feel, between what they desire and what they think is safest, between surrender and resistance. Every morning becomes more difficult because the quiet hours leave fewer places to hide. When the world is silent, distractions lose their influence. Responsibilities fade into the background. Noise disappears, and what remains is the truth waiting underneath everything else. That truth keeps finding its way back to you. No matter how many explanations they create, no matter how many times they attempt to redirect their attention, no matter how firmly they insist they have moved on, the feeling keeps returning, not because they want it to, because it has never truly left. What surprises them most is not the intensity itself. It is the persistence. They expected time to weaken it. They expected distance to dissolve it. They expected logic to overcome it. Yet none of those things worked the way they imagined. Instead, the feeling adapted. It survived every attempt to remove it. It remained present through every distraction and every denial, slowly, quietly, steadily, until one day they could no longer pretend they were unaffected. That realization changes everything, not because it instantly solves the situation, but because denial can no longer perform its function. Once the illusion breaks, it becomes impossible to view things exactly as they were before. the questions become louder, the emotions become clearer, the consequences of avoidance become harder to ignore, and suddenly the future requires answers that were never necessary before. They find themselves wondering what happens next, what they should do, whether they should continue resisting, whether they should finally acknowledge what they feel, whether remaining silent costs more than speaking honestly. Those questions linger in their mind long after the morning ends, because the issue is no longer whether the feeling exists. That question has already been answered. The issue now is what they will do with that knowledge, and that is where the deepest uncertainty begins, not in discovering the truth, but in deciding how to live with it. At this moment, they remain caught between the comfort of familiar defenses and the undeniable reality of what their heart continues revealing. The pressure keeps building, the awareness keeps growing, and beneath every attempt to regain control is a simple realization they can no longer escape. Some feelings become too significant to ignore, some connections become too meaningful to dismiss, and some truths, once fully recognized, continue echoing through every quiet morning long after denial has finally fallen apart. This experience was never only about you as an individual in their life. It was largely about the deeper parts of themselves that you helped awaken and bring into conscious awareness. That process of inner awakening is still unfolding and has not yet reached its final stage. They believed that accepting their feelings would make everything calmer and easier to manage over time. They were wrong. Admitting the truth this morning did not quiet the storm within them. It simply gave that storm a clear name and a recognizable identity. Once something meaningful has a name, it becomes far more difficult to avoid or escape. Awareness alone does not reduce the intensity of emotions. In many cases, it sharpens them. It transforms vague feelings into something solid, undeniable, and impossible to dismiss. That new reality began pressing against them almost immediately. They can no longer convince themselves that nothing is happening, or that these emotions will simply fade away on their own. Every thought now carries greater significance. Every memory feels more meaningful. Every quiet moment seems charged with tension and emotional energy. When the mind loses its ability to deny something real, it naturally begins to split into opposing directions. One side moves toward you, the other struggles desperately to pull away. Neither side is willing to surrender easily. This is not ordinary confusion. It is a genuine internal conflict between powerful desire and powerful self-protection occurring at the same time. Both forces continue growing stronger because what they feel for you has moved beyond simple attraction. It is gradually becoming emotional attachment, and attachment can feel threatening to someone who fears losing control over their choices, routines, and carefully protected independence. Most people never notice this deeper process taking place inside them. The stronger the emotional current becomes, the stronger their psychological defenses rise in response. That is why, after recognizing their true feelings, they did not immediately move forward with confidence. Instead, they paused. They thought too much. They examined every possibility from every angle. They started overanalyzing things that once felt completely natural because those things suddenly carried greater meaning and greater risk. Anything that matters deeply begins to feel dangerous. Dangerous to their freedom, dangerous to their identity, dangerous to the image of themselves they have spent years building and protecting. People do not fear what they do not value. That simple truth creates a contradiction they can no longer ignore. The same feeling drawing them closer is also encouraging them to retreat. The same emotion creating hope is also creating fear. And that contradiction generates constant tension beneath the surface. That ongoing tension drains their energy. It follows them into every area of daily life. It appears during ordinary moments that once felt completely normal, because now almost everything carries a subtle reminder of you. A familiar tone of voice, a brief pause in a conversation, a certain expression, a particular silence. Any of these can suddenly bring thoughts of you back into focus without warning. The subconscious mind holds on more tightly than the conscious mind realizes, because it does not operate according to schedules, plans, or logic. You have crossed an important threshold in their inner world. You are no longer something optional. You are no longer a passing thought they can easily set aside. Now they must confront the question they have avoided for so long. Why you? Why does your presence affect them in such a distinct and powerful way? Why does your influence feel different from everyone else? The more they search for logical explanations, the less logical it seems. This connection was never built on convenience. It was never based solely on circumstances. It cannot be reduced to a simple story or a single reason. It comes from something deeper, something rooted in recognition, something that feels both unchosen and impossible to avoid. And if this connection is real, then it asks something important of them. It asks for action, it asks for honesty, it asks for emotional openness, it asks for vulnerability. Those are the very things they have spent years avoiding. Because of that, they attempt to slow the process. They create distance, they delay decisions, they search for reasons to wait, they hope that time might weaken what they feel. Yet, distance rarely weakens a genuine emotional bond. In many situations, it strengthens it. Distance removes distractions. It strips away noise. It leaves only the truth. And when distractions disappear, that truth often becomes louder instead of quieter. That is exactly what is happening now. The truth is becoming increasingly difficult for them to ignore. They feel it in the way their thoughts return to you unexpectedly. They feel it in sudden emotional waves that appear during the day. They feel it in the restless sensation that refuses to settle, no matter how much effort they invest in controlling it. Suppression continues failing again and again. The tension is becoming more real because they are fully aware of their feelings while still actively resisting them. They recognize the truth, yet continue questioning it. They acknowledge its power, yet hesitate to carry its full weight. This creates ongoing psychological pressure that never completely disappears. Instead, it keeps building. It tightens gradually until something eventually has to give way. What makes this struggle even harder is that they are not only battling the feeling itself, they are also confronting what that feeling reveals about them. Their emotions expose hidden desires, hidden fears, hidden needs. What they feel for you reveals a longing to connect deeply with another person, a desire to be genuinely understood, a wish to be fully seen without hiding behind masks. At the same time, it reveals a fear of allowing another person to affect them so profoundly. Being affected deeply requires vulnerability. Vulnerability requires trust, and trust requires surrendering at least some control. That is what makes them uncomfortable. That is why they continue moving back and forth. One moment they lean closer emotionally, the next moment they retreat mentally. One moment they imagine positive possibilities, the next moment they convince themselves the situation is too complicated or too risky. This pattern is not random. It serves as a form of emotional protection. It allows them to experience the feelings gradually without fully surrendering to them all at once. But there is a limit to how long that strategy can work. You cannot experience something this meaningful halfway forever. You can postpone it, you can delay it, you can distract yourself from it, but eventually it demands to be faced. And every delay carries a cost. Suppressed emotions do not disappear without leaving traces behind. They transform, they become tension, they become restlessness, they become mental noise that follows a person throughout the day. Recently, that noise has become stronger for them, more persistent, more difficult to ignore. It is beginning to affect more than their emotions. It is influencing their thinking patterns, their daily habits, their behavior, even their physical state. Sometimes it appears as reduced concentration. Sometimes it appears as shifting moods. Sometimes it appears as unusually strong reactions to situations that have nothing to do with the real issue. What is happening beneath the surface is simple. An unresolved truth is rising upward, and that truth is demanding something they are not completely prepared to offer. Not yet, not without hesitation, not without fear. Yet the pressure continues building anyway. Every attempt to push it away only delays the inevitable confrontation. Every effort to suppress it creates more internal resistance. Every effort to avoid it strengthens the tension underneath. That is why they are closer to their personal breaking point than they realize. Not because they are weak, not because they are losing control completely, but because maintaining resistance requires enormous energy, and that energy is running lower with every passing day. Something important is beginning to crack inside them. The structure they built to contain these emotions is no longer as strong as it once was. The walls are still standing, but they feel the strain. They sense the pressure. They hear the quiet warning signs beneath the surface. Part of them knows they cannot continue carrying this contradiction forever. Part of them understands that sooner or later a choice will have to be made, a choice between continued resistance and honest acceptance, a choice between fear and openness, a choice between protecting old defenses and embracing a truth that has already become impossible to ignore. That realization is what makes this period so intense, because deep down they know the situation is changing, the emotions are growing stronger, the awareness is becoming clearer, and the space available for denial is becoming smaller with every passing day. Something significant is shifting inside them right now, not dramatically, not loudly, but steadily. And that quiet shift may be more powerful than any outward action because it is happening at the deepest level of their thoughts, emotions, and understanding. What they once resisted is becoming harder to reject. What they once questioned is becoming harder to doubt. And what they once tried to suppress is gradually demanding its place in the light. Not on the outside, where they continue maintaining a calm appearance through habit and careful effort every day. The real transformation is happening underneath the surface, where the mind gradually stops pretending and where truth exists without needing permission, approval, or validation from anyone. Repression always comes with a hidden price, and that price is now becoming due. The longer someone pushes down something authentic, the more forcefully it tends to return later. What once seemed manageable now feels intrusive. What once felt distant now feels immediate. What could once be questioned now feels undeniably real within their heart. When the subconscious can no longer remain contained, it does not negotiate gently. It breaks through suddenly, directly, and often in ways they never expected. It appears in unexpected reactions. It shows up as irritability. It reveals itself when minor problems create unusually strong frustration without any obvious reason. Their ability to focus disappears the moment thoughts of you enter their mind unexpectedly. You are no longer simply another person existing somewhere in their outer world. You have become part of their private inner reality, and that difference changes everything. External situations can be avoided, people can create distance, they can distract themselves, they can replace one activity with another, but internal realities follow a person everywhere. They follow them into silence, into solitude, into sleep, into the moments they believed belonged only to themselves. Their resistance is beginning to weaken because the central question has changed. The question is no longer whether they feel something genuine. That answer is already clear. The new question is what they are going to do about it. And that question frightens them more than the feelings themselves, because taking action means exposure. It means vulnerability. It means allowing another person to see parts of them they normally keep protected. Most people spend years trying to avoid exactly this kind of situation. You cannot fully control something that has already transformed you from within. And in ways they may not openly admit, you have changed them. Not temporarily, not superficially, but deeply.